Chapter 10, Section 2, we are talking about probability. Our essential question is, how can you describe the likelihood of an event? We look down below, our key idea is probability, and the definition is the probability of an event is a number that measures the likelihood that the event will occur. Probabilities are between 0 and 1, but also including 0 and 1. And the diagram below relates likelihood above the diagram and probabilities below the diagram. So what that means is the likelihood and the words that we're going to use are above the graph, and the probabilities that we see are below the graph. If you notice, these probabilities are in fraction form, decimal form, and percentage form. So we're going to use all three of those. It doesn't matter which one you use, they are all three available to you. So if I look at question A, it says there's an 80% chance of a thunderstorm tomorrow. Describe the likelihood of the event. So if I'm describing the likelihood of the event, I'm actually going to use these 5 words here, these 5 phrases, to describe the chance that I'm going to have a thunderstorm tomorrow. So if it's an 80% chance, I'm going to look at my percentages, and if I don't see the percentage I'm looking for, I want to find the percentage that's closest to 80%. So the percentage that's closest to 80% would be 75. So if I'm looking at 75%, the word that goes with 75% is likely. So the likelihood of the event, I'm just going to put the word likely. And that's actually my answer. That's all you have to put. So likely means there's a pretty good chance of it happening, 75%. Let's look at question B. So it says the probability that you land a jump on a snowboard is 1/2. So fraction form, so now I'm going to look at the fraction form. And I actually see 1/2 on here. And I'm going to use the same words that you see here. So if it says the probability that you land on a snowboard is 1/2, I'm going to use this phrase. Equally likely to happen or not to happen. So I'm going to go ahead and write that. Equally likely to happen or not happen. Okay. So if I'm looking at question C, it says there is a 100% chance that the temperature will be less than 120 degrees tomorrow. So 120 degrees, and we're at 100% chance. So if I go back up to my table, 100% means it is certain. So no matter what, it is going to happen. So the likelihood is certain. And those are my answers. So once again, we're using this table to help us out a lot. Now be aware, when you have a test or quiz, this table will not be available to you. So you do have to memorize these. Let's go turn to the back. In the back, now we're going to look at finding the probability of an event. The one fraction I want you to notice is this one right here. So if I have an event, I'm going to use the number of favorable outcomes over the number of possible outcomes. So all your answers in this section are going to be a fraction, and make sure they are a simplified fraction. Remember, anytime we're talking about fractions or anything like that, the simplest form is important. So make sure we do that. So if I have a die here, remember my options for a dice are 1 through 6. So we're just going to put that visual down just so we see it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are my options. So it says I roll a number cube. This one. It says, what is the probability of rolling an odd number? So I'm going to write P, that means probability, and the event that's happening is rolling an odd. So I'm going to put P parentheses odd because that's what my fraction is going to be. And so if I'm looking at this, I want to first see the number of favorable outcomes, or the outcomes that can happen. So I'm going to look at my numbers. I need to find the odd numbers that are available to me. Those are 1, 3, and 5. So that's 3 ways that I could roll an odd. The number of possible outcomes, there's 6 numbers on the die, so my fraction is 3 over 6. Now, we do have to simplify. A 3 goes into both of those, so I'm going to divide both by 3. And that gives me 1/2. And that is actually my final answer. So 1/2 is the probability of rolling an odd number. Let's look at B. What is the probability of rolling a number greater than 2? Let's first set up our problem. So I'm going to use, say, greater than 2 in my parentheses. And this just kind of clarifies what we are looking at. So probability greater than 2. So I look over here, what are the numbers that are greater than 2? 3, 4, 5, and 6. That is 4 different numbers. Once again, how many favorable or how many possible outcomes are there? I'm still rolling the dice, or still rolling that number cube, so there are still 6 possible options. Once again, I can simplify, this time by 2, and that gives me 2/3. This last one, I know we're kind of crammed for space here, but we're still going to make it work. What is the probability of rolling a 7? So I'm going to put P7. Okay, so if I look at the dice, I'm going to see how many 7s are there. Well, there's none, so 0. How many options are there? How many possible outcomes? There's 6. Anytime you have 0 as your numerator, your final answer needs to be simplified by 0 because 0 divided by 6 is 0. And that is my final answer. And there's no 7s. If I roll that number cube, I'm never going to get a 7. So the probability of rolling a 7 is 0. So once again, we have our practice problems down below. All right, so we have our numbers here. So if I were you, I would count out all these numbers and make a fraction bar, because this denominator is going to be the total amount of numbers that we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's going to be one of our main fractions, something over 10. Now I'm not going to tell you what the numerator is because it's going to change depending on the question. Once again, if you have any questions, make sure you write them down so you can get them answered tomorrow in class. Make sure you try all the practice problems.